Last two episodes, I have talked about the 100-hour rule and the 100-point score. So, does that mean that everyone has the same kind of distribution to their 100 hours or to the score? That's not the case. Actually, that's going to be decided a lot more by the priorities or the anchors that you're going to set for your own life. Welcome to episode 14 of the OneLife Theory podcast. My name is Rajiv. Today I'm going to talk about the 6 possible anchors to your life. As I said, not everyone has the same kind of distribution to their daily hours or their weekly hours or to the 100-point score itself. So let me cover what I believe are the 6 anchors, right? And the first anchor is one of balance. And, whether that's the 100 hours that are split into, let's say, 50 at work and 50 for your social and your senses, or whether it's the 100-point score, where, if you remember, I talked about 30, 30, 25, and 15 as the weightages. That applies to people who want to run their life as balance and people who are not essentially in the rat race either at work or are not right now at a particular life stage, right? And this works well if you're sort of sorted, you're not, going after what most others do. But it's very tough to achieve in a developing economy like India or around the kind of peers that you have to have actually a very balanced life. If you've done it, great, but it's not ideal. And I don't think I'm that kind of a person that would ever want to have that balance. And I have tried in the past, but I just figured that I'm not the kind of person who probably likes that kind of balance. And I've had a particular span of life in the last 2 years where I've tried that and it just didn't work for me. So I'll come to what I think are far more of it for me, right? But that's the first anchor to life. The second kind of anchor is actually what I call workflow, right? And where your workflow means that you're focusing a lot more at work. So instead of what at a score level was 30, 30, 25, and 15, I would maybe then tweak it to 30 and 40 on the service part and 20 and 10 on the other two aspects, right? Because you have to compromise somewhere. And even on the time front, this probably means in a regular week, you're probably going to spend at least 50 to 60 hours on work and only 40 hours on social and senses. This essentially means also that you're focused a lot more on doing something impactful. And this applies a lot to people who have either joined their first job or are trying to make an impact in their careers or are taking on a very big responsibility at work. And you really are gearing up for doing something big. A lot of my life, at least, in terms of Yahoo or Infosys or Urban Ladder at different points in time, have been around just focusing and getting a lot more impact created at work. And that essentially means you're going to spend a lot more hours at work. Still, there is one more anchor which I'll come to, which is far more at work, but this is certainly different from the balance anchor, and you're going to be spending far more at work. The third anchor is what I call really entrepreneurship or starting up, right? And this is even taking the work anchor to the next level. Now, here, what you started off at work as 30, 40, 20, and 10, you're going to be giving 30, 50. And if you see, I still keep it 30 for the self because you can't afford to screw that. But you're going to be giving 50 for work. And that's out of a score of 100, 50% to the work. And you have only 20, which you're going to distribute between social and senses because somewhere you have to have that compromise. And if, from a time perspective, we are talking about at least 70 to 80 hours of the 100 hours just on your startup or your entrepreneurship journey, right? And if you're really starting up, that's the kind of work that you'll have to do. Funnily enough, this is something that I've been trying to do, in the early phases of Urban Ladder, or I am extremely sure in the next phase of what I'm going to be doing in the next 15, 30 days, I'm going to actually be jumping between anchors 2 and anchors 3 somewhere in terms of the time that I'll be spending. And I have figured over my own journey over the last specifically 3, 4 years that that's the kind of anchor that's going to keep me happy, right? And I've tried every other anchor and, I'll cover the other anchors, but I've also realized that I'm a kind of a person who really needs an anchor and go all in on whatever I do. And that's what's going to keep me happy. So The reason why this is important is because not everyone is geared for balance, not everyone is geared for other anchors. You have to be deciding as to what your anchor is. But if you're going to be starting up, be ready that you're going to be pretty much dropping every other aspect of time, and you're going to be focusing just on work as the only anchor. I'm talking about of a 100-hour active work week, 70 to 80 hours just in your startup. So that's the kind of compromise you'll have to do. The fourth anchor is around relationships, and let's say the kind of time that you would spend here. If on the score you had on balance 30, 30, 25, and 15, if your anchor is going to be relationships, you're going to do probably more like 30, 25, 35, and 10, right? So far more. And I would say this is around maybe a life stage like, marriage or love or first love or a kid. And I'm strong proponent that even, guys should get 6 months paternity because they need to really spend the time with the kid if they have really delivered a kid. In hindsight, one of the probably not so brilliant things that I did was to have a kid and do a startup around the same time, and felt guilty on both places. And if you're going to be having a life stage where you need to spend a lot more time, you just dedicate that time to that. So I would say this is one area where you can focus on spending the time in the relationship, also merge in with the senses. So from a time perspective, maybe we are talking about, let's say, instead of 25 hours, maybe 30, 35 hours. It usually comes at the cost of work, probably, and that's why you probably take either a sabbatical, or you sort of communicate to your manager that you have a particular life stage that you have to do, because it's very difficult to both balance social and work at the same time. So I don't think it's prudent to have either entrepreneurship or start a new journey at the same time you're also starting a new relationship. The fifth anchor is going to be fun and creativity. It's possibly applies for a lot of the new age folks who are going to be entering 30s and 40s, not for our generation, but who want balance from very early on. And these could be the people who maybe decide their life around maybe freelancing, or people who take on a sabbatical between, let's say, two particular journeys, and it could be 2 or a 3 month sabbatical where they want to focus a lot more around fun, creativity, and experiences. They could also be doing this on an ongoing basis where they decide to have a digital nomadic life, and are not, here to focus on too much on a relationship or too much on work. And it's possible to do this ongoing, and it's a great way if you can do that and configure that. And your wiring also needs to be that, but it also becomes very difficult for you to focus too much on any of the other aspects. So here I'm talking about maybe the last 15-point aspect, getting a score of 25, or even in terms of time in the 100-hour week, you're probably going to dedicate at least 30 hours of that 100-hour week just on fun and creativity, and if not more, right? Which obviously comes with the balance of maybe relationships or real work that you can do. I would still keep the self at 30% weightage on the score, or giving off that time on the 20 hours. So this is the fifth aspect that could be a potential anchor. The last one is recuperation, or health as the anchor, and I'm going to reserve that for maybe post your retirement, or you're really recovering from a serious illness or a chronic condition and stuff, where that 30-point score actually has to be increased to 40 points, which essentially means the rest of it all put together, you're going to be working lesser, going to be probably spending lesser time with relationships, and maybe given your going to be at bed or whatever, going to spend probably a bit more time on your senses. So the score wise, it's probably going to be 40 for self, 20, 20, 20 on the other aspects. From a pure time perspective, you probably have, out of the 100-hour week, you're probably going to dedicate another 20 hours or more for just yourself, and you're going to be having 80 hours for all the other aspects of life. This I'm going to reserve for those special occasions where post your retirement, where you have to anyway take care of your health beyond your 60s and 70s far more, but keep the mind active so you're not like really out of a job where you're doing nothing, or really recovering from a serious kind of a condition. So what does this anchor really mean, right? And what this actually means is, for a particular chapter of your life, maybe a 3 to a 5 year journey, you're going to have a particular anchor. This doesn't mean that for the rest of your life, it's only this anchor. Obviously no human being can do that unless you're probably Elon Musk. And you're going to make sure that you're going to do justice to that anchor that you have decided. And also what that means is the time allocation based on the anchor that you choose, you're going to try and stick to it. You're going to evaluate yourself whether you're doing justice to that time allocation. You can't say that you're going to be focusing on, let's say, relationships, but you're going to be spending all the time at your work. Or vice versa. You say you're going to be starting up, you're going to start a new work journey, and you're going to be spending time on Netflix or your relationships. It doesn't work that way, right? And that conscience and self-consciousness is extremely important, the self-awareness. And two, you're also going to communicate to all the stakeholders based on which aspect of life you are in, right? For example, it's also possible that you may choose to be on a balanced zone, but there are going to be 2 or 3 weeks where you're going to do a lot of work, or you're going to be doing workflow, but you're having 2 or 3 weeks where you have a product launch and you're going to be working as if it's a startup, or everything else has to be compromised. The key to this is to communicate to the different stakeholders, to your own self and to the different stakeholders, that you're going to be making this difference for the coming week, for the coming 2 weeks, so that they also understand that, hey, it's a very special consideration or a specific occasion that you're going to be doing, right? And you're also going to be very self-critically evaluating whether you're doing justice to that particular aspect, and not, saying something and doing something else. So that's what it means. The anchor actually means it's for a particular chapter of your life. It also means that you're going to be communicating far more. And don't fall into this trap of guilt trapping yourself, because a lot of people today, feel extremely happy, or, have this joy about communicating that they're going to be always busy, or, they're always working. And that's all a load of nonsense. You communicate and you adhere to these times and do justice to it. You can do well on multiple aspects of your life. Don't fall for this busyness trap and say that, you're always going to be working. And fine, if you're going to be starting up, be ready for that 70-80 hours of working and compromise on everything else. But on every other anchor, you actually have some time that you can dedicatedly do on some other aspects and do justice to it, communicate well, self-analyze and be self-critical in terms of making sure that you're doing justice. If you do that, the time as well as the anchors can give you far more satisfaction, far less guilt in terms of the way you're living your life. So that's what I want to talk about this episode. You have to consider this episode and the last episode on time together and superimpose that on the 4 aspects of life. And then you get a lot more clarity. I'll go in a lot more detail in the 8-step framework. Until then, see you in the next episode.